Hi everyone, it's Donna Stevenson here from Succeed with Dyslexia, and we have another expert guest because we're going to talk today a lot about education, early intervention, the changes that we are experiencing here in the UK around our legislation and how that's going to impact on our community as well. And I can think of no better expert to discuss this with than Lorraine Petersen OBE. Hi Lorraine, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Donna. It's really good to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you, because this is going to be a really informative chat. Now, you are an educational consultant, Lorraine, and I know you're going to share, your expertise and your background and so on in a moment. But I also just want to flag to our listeners that you are also Lorraine Petersen OBE, and that OBE is for recognition to the special educational needs community. So it's such an honour to talk to you, and thank you so much for all those years of service for that OBE was awarded to you for in recognition of that. So it's a real honour and a privilege to talk to you. So we get going then, because this is a really interesting conversation that we hope people will take a lot from. So Lorraine, set the scene for us. The OBE is recognition for a long, illustrious career in special educational needs. So where did your journey start, and this kinds of, wonderful work that you've been doing over the years? Please do share.
Thank you, Donna. I'm happy to share, and thank you for those nice comments as well. So I started teaching 43 years ago. So I've been in education for a long time. So I started teaching. My first job was as a remedial teacher in a large junior school. We don't use that terminology now, but so SEN was there right from the very start. But then I taught for 25 years in mainstream education, had two headships for the last 10 years of those 25 years, and always passionate about supporting vulnerable, disadvantaged young people and those that had special educational needs. Obviously, back in those days, we didn't have the labels we've got today. We didn't have, the diagnoses that we've got today. So we just knew that children were different, and we knew that they needed additional support, but we weren't tied up in legislation or anything like that. So it was a good time to be teaching. After 25 years in education in schools, I went to be the Chief Executive Officer of NASON, the National Association for Special Educational Needs, which was a charitable organisation that supported anybody working with children with special needs. And I worked there for 10 years, and I was heavily involved during that 10 years in the last SEND reforms in England. So back in sort of 2011 to 2014, and worked very closely with the Department of Education at that time as the Chief Executive of NASON to try and implement or get the right implementation of those those changes, I suppose. And then about 8 years ago, decided to work independently. I just wanted a bit of I wanted to try and slow down a little bit, but that hasn't quite worked out the way I wanted it, but that's fine. So I work for myself. I'm an educational consultant, and as well as being passionate about special educational needs, which I still they're of my heart and my soul. As I said to a school yesterday, I'm a bit like a stick of rock with SEN sort of running all the way through me, or SEND. But because mental health and well-being became part of the sort of SEN world, if you like, I've sort of gone down that route as well. So I do a lot of work around mental health and well-being. And again, because of the vulnerability factor, I also do some work around safeguarding. So lots of different strands, but all about working with our most vulnerable and our most disadvantaged youngsters. So, still loving every minute of working and all sorts of different things through training and working with schools, working with local authorities, etc. So lots of things to keep me busy, and lots of things to keep my brain still working and whizzing about even after all these years.
Well, you're such a valuable part of the community, Lorraine. I'm glad that you are still keeping busy and you want to stay, in this community, really, because we need you and all the fantastic work that you do. It's really interesting for you to talk about the different strands, and I'm going to ask you a little bit about mental health health a bit later on,
Yep.
because all these things connect, don't they? I know
Absolutely.
sometimes for the purpose of these conversations, we keep things a bit separate, but in the real world, everything interlinks in that way.
Yep.
So I can't think of anyone better to chat with about these different layers, really.
No.
So it's going to be a really informative chat. So I don't know which way to do this, actually, Lorraine. I want to ask you about early intervention and identification and what that means to you. But I also want to ask you about the changes that we've got here, happening within our structures and our legislation for special educational needs here in the UK. So actually, I don't normally do this. Which one do you think is a better place to start? The changes and then talk about intervention, or do we start with intervention and then talk about the changes?
Yeah, let's start with intervention, because
Okay,
that's
perfect.
what's happening now. So
Yes.
we can, let's talk about that.
Okay, so tell us what you think in a nutshell. And this is a big question. What does early intervention mean to you, and how important is the earliest kind of time, and how important it is that it is early, and is it ever too late? So share your thoughts on that if you don't mind.
So for me, early intervention is all, for whatever we're trying to do. Early intervention for me is about getting seeing where a young person, a child is having difficulties, and identifying and intervening as early as we possibly can. One of the things that is a challenge, I think, is that we often get caught up in, they're too young. How can you identify when they're only just started school, or they haven't started reading yet, or they're not developing as like they should be? There's all sorts of barriers that people put up. And to be fair, if I go back to my start in teaching, there was a sort of unwritten rule, I suppose, that no child got assessed and identified before the age of 7. So they went all the way through their sort of early primary years, where we all, as a teacher, you knew that something was different, but you wouldn't be able to get support from, an educational psychologist or, teams like that, without them being of a certain age. So I think we've moved from that. I think that we now are able to identify much earlier. I still think there is a bit of a barrier in terms of the age thing. But I know that, there are early years settings that are really, really good at identifying. We know that some children will be identified at birth because they're born with a disability or they're born with a need. And we may not know what that will mean long term in terms of their educational progression, but we know that there is something there. I think that in the realms of dyslexia, in specific learning difficulties, really, I think we've been on a bit of a journey. I think there was a time when, we almost screened and assessed children too much, too early, and then we've gone through a period where I think that. And I know in some local authorities they don't even acknowledge that dyslexia is a need. And so we don't assess or whatever. What I'm now seeing, actually, Donna, is I think schools are getting better at screening. So it may not be that, they're getting diagnosed or having sort of more formal assessments, but schools are using screening checks more readily. And what that then does is give the school an idea of where the barriers might be, where the difficulties might be, and they can put in place strategies from an early age. What we do know is if you can put those strategies in place early, there is the possibility that you can plug the gap. If a child has got a specific learning difficulty, they're never going to be cured, if that's, I hate that word, but do you know what I mean? But there's lots and lots of strategies and support that you can put in place that will actually make their journey through life a lot easier. And if you talk to anybody, an adult that is, has got any specific learning difficulty, they will all say that had somebody have helped me earlier, I would, have got my strategies in place long before I did. So, and to be fair, it is often when a young person goes to university, that it first gets picked up, and you just think, how have they got through the entire school system without anybody acknowledging that they've got a need? That to me is what early intervention is all about. It means that those young people are not struggling all the way through their educational life. And when it's connected to reading or language or literacy, everything we do in school from the day the child comes into reception is bound up in reading, writing and literacy. If you are struggling with that, then you are going to struggle all the way through your academic life. That doesn't mean to say that you won't be bright and able to access, everything and get good GCSEs or A levels, but you will struggle because you won't have the strategies that's needed. So early identification to me is about, we identify that these are where the needs are, this is where the barriers are, but we can put in these interventions, we can put in these strategies that will help you access the curriculum that you need to access. So hopefully that's sort of answered your question.
It does. And you've answered that beautifully. It makes perfect sense. On the back of that, you've talked about university students and adults reflecting back. Is it ever too late to have that identification some way, whether it's a screener or a full diagnostic assessment?
I don't think it's ever too late. I just think that, the later it is, the more you've missed. So, lots of people don't get diagnosed, of all sorts of things. I mean, we've got, women who have had autism but weren't diagnosed because there's, issues around early diagnosis of girls with autism. There's a light bulb moment, and I've got a very good friend who has always known she was different. She's always known that there was something different about her. And one day we were talking, she's the same age as me. So, she's been through and she's had a really good job and she's now retired, etc. But we were talking about autism and Asperger's, sort of high functioning autism. And she just looked at me and she says, that's what I've had all my life and nobody's ever told me. And she wrote to me later and she said, I looked it up and it was a light bulb moment. And this is a lady who's retired now, and being an eminent scientist, but she recognised that some of the things that she'd had to struggle with, had she have been supported in school, she may have found more easier. Didn't stop her doing anything, but actually there were things that could have been put in place earlier that would have just helped her. So
yeah, it's powerful, Lorraine, because these conversations on social media and from, friends, and you may read things in the press across the world, really, we are hearing people speak up now and say, hey, this is me, but now I am this age and lived with that for whatever reason and only just found out. And, I am at retirement age, or I'm in my middle years, or whatever it may be. And I'm going to pick that up again if it's okay, because I think, these are key issues when we are looking at mental health and well-being and how people feel about themselves. So before we get to that bit though, I'd like to ask you on the back of what those brilliant things you've just said about early intervention, and you've explained it so well, and thank you. We know then here in the UK we've got these imminent changes coming through, and we've chatted before about what that means. And as I say, you're brilliant, Lorraine, at putting it for people like me who don't know a lot about these things in a great clear package for us to try and understand about what's going to happen, what is happening, and where will that take us into, a transformational, transformed education system on the back of some of this legislation. So where are we at with those changes? And just talk us through that journey.
So, as I said, back in 2014, we had a new Children and Families Act. So, and part 3 of the Children and Families Act is all about children with special educational needs and disabilities. So everything is actually enshrined in law when it comes to getting support for children and young people and their families. On the back of that, in 2019, the government decided that we needed to have a review. It was 5 years on, we needed a review. unfortunately, because of Brexit and because of COVID and because of changing ministers, we didn't actually get anything about a review until earlier this year. So at the end of March this year, we got what is a green paper. So a green paper is a consultation document, and it's looking at what the future of special educational needs and disability will look like going forward. Now, there's been lots and lots of debate at the moment. Well, there still is actually, because we're still in consultation period about if the reforms that had come in 2014 had actually been implemented properly, we wouldn't need another green paper now. So there's a lot of dispute at the moment about, do we actually need change, or do we just need implementation properly of what we got a long time ago?
Did it not get implemented, Lorraine, because of COVID? Or
No, it wasn't COVID.
Okay.
It's because although it's a government initiative, if you like, so government is in charge of special educational needs and disability, as they are for all education. It's at local authority level where it's actually so local authorities have the duty to carry out all the legislation that's in the Act, if you like. And we've got 152 local authorities who all tried to do things differently. Some followed the law, some didn't. Some worked with parents, some didn't. And it's taken a while for there to be some accountability, if you like, of that. Remembering that on the back of that, most of our local authorities have been paid to the bone. So in England, there's been a lot less funding going into local authorities, because we also have academies who are not attached to local authorities. Then there's less money in the pot for them, although the local authority still has the duty over SEN for our academies. So it's a bit of a messy system, really. So we're now at a point where we've got this green paper. And, there's a lot of, I won't say huge change in there. There's lots of tweaking, if you like. My concern is that at the end of the day, I can't see a lot that's in that green paper that will actually impact on an individual child that's got a special need. There's lots in there about supporting parents. There's lots in there about mainstream schools becoming much more inclusive. And that's something that is really close to my heart. And I think just bringing in a bit of the mental health and wellbeing bit here, we do have a number of young people in our schools today who, because they haven't been identified with their learning need, they then get very frustrated, angry, anxious, poor self-esteem, which may result in challenging behaviour, which then schools can't deal with and exclude that child. And actually, when you peel back all the layers of the onion, it's because they weren't taught to read, or their lack of reading wasn't identified as being, something. So the bit about the inclusive schools, I would like to think will make a huge difference. I just think, there's 23,000 schools in this country. Well, it's not, about 45% are now part of academies. So, we've got such a mixed up system that trying to embed that, I think, is going to be a challenge. And at the same time, again, within England, we've got such a strong accountability system that was about exams and passing tests. And schools are driven by that accountability. So if you want, let's take a secondary school, your measure is on how many children or young people you get 8 GCSEs, and I think it's now grade 5 to 9, or it used to be 8 star to C, but it's now 5 to 9. If you have got students in your school that are only going to get 2s and 3s and 4s, they will drag your results down. Now, a good inclusive school will be able to talk that scenario out, but some schools are driven by those results, and so trying to be inclusive and get those top results is going to be a challenge for schools. I think that if it's like the green paper we got prior to the last reforms, whatever is in that document, we'll get probably half of it. There's an awful lot in there that is going to require a lot of money. So, you know, additional funding to implement. And at the moment, I'm not seeing where that's coming from. Sitting alongside that green paper, we've also got the school's white paper, or the school's bill as it now is. And that's very much about, you know, all schools getting to certain targets. And it's also about, by 2030, all schools being part of a trust. So the government's drive to, you know, get everybody as part of a trust. And sitting in all of that, obviously, is our special schools and our alternative provisions. And where are they going to sit in all of that? And I think what we're finding at the moment is that we've got our special schools are now incredibly specialist. So they are accommodating children and young people with very profound, multiple, complex needs. And our alternative provisions are becoming a bit of a sort of nobody else wants them, so they'll go into alternative provision. And what I'm seeing is we have this group of young people now who may have a specific learning difficulty like dyslexia, and mainstream schools are not supporting them because they haven't actually worked out what their needs are. So we're seeing some challenging mental health and wellbeing concerns, but then there aren't the specialist places for those youngsters who are really struggling with, you know, some of those specific learning difficulties. So, and again, I'm not sure that the green paper will support that. I think the positive, and there is a positive here, is that we've also got at the moment going through the private members bill on dyslexia and screening, dyslexia screening and training bill that Matt Hancock has brought as a private members bill. And, you know, that could make a huge difference, because obviously what Matt wants to happen is that all primary school pupils are screened from as early an age as you possibly can. And then as part of initial teacher education and ongoing teacher professional development, there is elements of you know, training on neurodiversity and how you meet those needs in the classroom. So that's a really good bit of something that's happening. So, you know, it's just where that journey goes. And that's the problem with the green paper. Until we've done the consultation, until the government have responded to the consultation, you don't actually know what's going to come out. And then it could take 3 years for change to actually happen. So we could have a different government by then. We could, you know, everything just takes so much time. So for me, what we need to be doing is getting better now. And again, the way I see that is the sharing of good practice. We've got some brilliant practice out there, you know, and I'm sure, you know, with Succeed with Dyslexia, you hear about good practice all the time, but it's making sure that that's then shared with other schools, with other people, so that when in our early years, or, you know, in Key Stage 1, we've got children who are starting to show signs of having some difficulties, we can use those screeners. We can, you know, do some of that early intervention, early identification, and then put in the strategies that we need to put in as early as possible, which might, you know, those children then take those with them throughout their lives.
Wow, I mean, that is a great overview. And I've got lots of things to ask you on the back of that, Lorraine. Yep. I love what you said there about showcasing great practice. Yep. That sounds like a future campaign for us, actually. So thank you. That's really really important. And it's great to hear that you think that could help in some way.
I mean, I go into schools all the time. I've been doing some SEND reviews recently, and, you know, I've seen some stunning practice. Yes. And I've seen some, you know, incredible one-page aid memoirs for teachers, you know, just bullet points of things to do, strategies to use. And you just think, you know, if every teacher had that in their folder on it when they're planning their lessons, and it would just make such a difference. Yeah. Because I still think that too many teachers don't know what they don't know. Yeah. They're going into a classroom with 30 young people of whatever age, and sitting in front of them are probably 5, 6, 7 who all have additional needs. And actually, they have not been trained to either identify or to intervene and know what to do. Yeah.
And you're right, it is, when you say it like that, it's shocking because, and I know at the British Dyslexia Association have campaigned for many years to have SEN, of which, of course, dyslexia is one,
Yep.
be included in initial teacher training. And that's an ongoing campaign. It sounds like it should be a no-brainer that should be in there, and that this should not be a controversial ask, I don't think.
And also, Donna, and I've said that, I mean, this has been a mantra of mine for years. What's good practice for children with SEN is good practice for everybody.
Yes.
So if you put in place some strategies that might help a youngster that might have dyslexia, you're not putting anything in that will stop anybody else learning.
No, you're right. And, there's a phrase that's used a lot now, Lorraine. All teachers are teachers of SEN children. And you're right. There's this concept of, if you're getting it right for children who have barriers to learning, all children benefit, and adults in learning environments too. And the fact that this isn't a niche issue, that a child is sent away to be, in quotes, fixed or sorted out in some way. It's at the heart of learning. And actually, when we work with those kids, it benefits all our children as well. So I love what you've said. Yes, please do.
Sorry, I was just going to say one other thing that I again is a bit of a soapboxy bit for me, but we've also learned during the pandemic the breadth of support that technology can give us. We've all latched onto technology in a way that none of us were using technology pre-COVID. And for some youngsters, the use of that technology has opened the door. So, I go into schools still, and, every single child has got to write everything. And yet, they can use a laptop, they can use an iPad, they can dictate into a mobile phone, but they still have to write. And, you just think, some of our youngest, even some pupils in primary years, by the time they get into the world of work, there will not be pens and paper. There won't be. They will be using technology. So why are we making them write when that's their barrier? And for a lot of children with specific learning difficulties, writing is the barrier. Reading might be as well, but writing is often the barrier. And now we know that, you quoting, but Microsoft or Google, they've got so many adaptable programs that you can use to, get bigger text or voice activate, all of those things that are already built into your computer. You don't have to buy them. They're not add-ons. So to me, I think that one of the positive way forwards is about we've got to embed technology in everything that we're doing now.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it does.
And, as adults, even now, very rarely do we write anything. Everything's emails and on our computers anyway. So it's already here. By the time our children grow up, it's going to be even more, advanced and a basic requirement. Yeah. Is there anything in these new legislations coming through, Lorraine, in recognition of the use of technology in that way?
I think that if the government are absolutely, wedded, and I think they are, to mainstream schools becoming much more inclusive, the only way you're going to be able to do that is look at how can we do things differently. And so how can we offer a curriculum which is like the one that their peers are having, but somebody that's got some challenges or some barriers, how can we offer that in a different way? And for me, that's what technology will allow us to do. Yeah. You go into a special school where you've got children, with complex needs. There's those schools are full of technology. I'm a chair of governors at a special school, and we've got children who use eye gaze technology, so only their eyes will move, and yet they can put sentences together using eye gaze technology. Now, if they can do that, think what just having a laptop or just having an iPad could do for a youngster that's really struggling with their reading and writing. So I think there's ways that we can get technology in on some of the fronts, if you like. That the problem that there is with anything that comes, and this isn't a criticism, but everything is about money. And so what you find is that if the government put too much into a document, that means that there's got to be more money found. They then, the comeback will be, well, you pay for it. And we know, we haven't got the money. It's, we've got to find better ways of using what we've got. Yes. But I do think that over over lockdown, many schools were were able to get laptops and iPads. So I go into schools now and they have got, lots and lots of equipment and devices for children. So it's not like saying, oh, we've only got one computer suite and they only go there once a week. You actually can have an iPad in a classroom or a laptop in a classroom in front of a youngster, and they're using it on a daily basis. I was in a school the other day. Every single pupil has a Chromebook. Every pupil, and they use it for all sorts of lessons. Now, there's inclusion, yes, because not everybody might need that, and not everybody might like that, but they've got one if they need it.
Yes.
So,
I guess from what you've said, these are some of the benefits, if I can put it like that, around COVID.
Oh, yeah.
Is that, it did, through necessity, drive through some of this technology now that's gone into schools. And I guess it's about keeping hold of that, adding to that and developing it. Just on the back of what you've said about Matt Hancock's bill going through about screening, I'm guessing then from what you say, that's a missing piece that maybe is in that new legislation to come through. If it's required an add-on members bill, is it called, Lorraine? So an add-on piece of legislation, private members, thank you, that's going through our parliament. Is that not addressed within those showcase centre stage documents that the government's put together?
No, because there's not a lot that is bespoke, if you like. It's very general. Yeah. It's about systems and processes, really. So it's not about the nitty gritty of the everyday. It's very much about the whole of England's policy and procedures, and how they will work. He does put families at the heart of everything we do, and so did the previous legislation. But unfortunately, families still feel that they're having to fight for everything that they want for their children and young people. And I think we've just got to get better at working together, really. And in the same way, we still haven't mastered, if you like, that education, health and social care triangle, because if children have got learning needs, they may also have some medical needs, may not, but they might, and they may also have social needs. Yeah. So we've got to have that joined upness, because otherwise you've just got three systems that are fighting each other, and then it all comes down to money and who's paying for what. So that joined upness has got to be got right, and that's something that didn't get. It was in the previous legislation, but we're still struggling in many parts of the country with that.
Yeah, and as we said earlier, we are complete human beings, aren't we? Yeah. I know sometimes for organisational purposes we have to have things separate, but in the real world we are, very many layers around these issues. And this brings us back then for something I wanted to talk to you about, which I know is a passion of yours, and we've just been talking a lot about mental health here as well for the last few months. And my goodness, it's created a lot of conversations across the community and beyond. So it's this idea then, and it's good to hear that somebody like Matt Hancock's obviously passionate about early identification through screening or whatever they've figured out may work, and that's doable and practical and so on. I know he has dyslexia, so obviously it's something very close to his heart. And I wonder if in that want to put together that bill and push it through and start these conversations, is there that recognition, do you think, Lorraine, that yes, like you said earlier, as soon as we can and it is practically possible, we want to try and identify, because beyond trying to get somebody through an education system and reach their potential, we know that if we don't, it can have a detrimental effect on that person's mental health and well-being and so on. So what are your thoughts on that correlation, that connection between identification, knowing who you are, and feeling good about yourself and having good mental health and well-being?
And I think there's a huge connection. And I think coming out of a global pandemic, it's an even bigger topic than it was 2.5 years ago. And it was getting quite a big topic then. But I think that, we've got children and young people and right from pre-early years, really. So preschool, we've got children sort of 2 and 3 who have been born during COVID. They haven't been able to go to mother and toddler groups or play groups, or so we're already knowing that their language skills are maybe not as advanced as they might have been, and their social skills are not as advanced as they might have been. So they're now coming into nursery and reception, so they're seeing a challenge with some children, and if then we don't identify, if on top of that they have got an additional need, which is a neurodiverse need that actually would have been there whether we were in a pandemic or not, those youngsters are going to really be missing out. So for me, doing those screeners, whatever it is really, but actually acknowledging that you're not diagnosing, you're not actually saying this child has got, whatever, but there might be traits you can see from the screener that there's certain things that they might be a barrier or having difficulty with. So we can start putting in strategies from a very early age to help them. That then, what I believe that then does is that if they are then succeeding, their self-esteem is good, their self-confidence is good, they've got the skills to, perform even better. So even if they are behind their peers, they still are doing okay and they're making good progress. Therefore, they'll be in a good place. But if you are a youngster that constantly feels, I can't do it, it's too hard, I can't read it, I don't know how to write, I can't do it, then your anxiety levels will go up and your mental state will not be in a good place. So you have poor self-esteem, poor self-confidence. So you're spiraling downwards, really. And then the difficulty then is, it doesn't matter what intervention you put in place to address the barrier to learning. If they're not in a good place to learn, it won't matter. So we've got to address the mental health and well-being needs first, because you can one of the things I got very cross about as we went through COVID was the government's constant catch up. Well, actually, some of these youngsters have come back into school, and it's not about them catching up with English or maths. It's actually about we need to put the support in for their mental health and well-being. We need to get them back into school. We need to get them back into routines. Some of our, if you take sort of year 2, so 7-year-olds who are now, about to go into Key Stage 2, they haven't had a full year of full education for the whole of their Key Stage 1, they've been in and out. I know, I'm not saying they haven't had, but they've had online, but it's much harder to do online learning with very young children. And, we are seeing more and more of those youngsters who maybe would have been identified had they have been in school, who are, now, there are some challenges in terms of their behaviour because they're so anxious and they're so, they don't know how to control their own anxiety. They haven't got the vocabulary or the skills around emotions and feelings. And so, what do? Well, the gasket just blows, and, what you see is a dysregulated child, which could all stem from the fact that nobody's actually recognised that this child has got a learning need. But by now they've got a serious mental need, emotional need, and it's no good addressing the learning need. We've got to address the emotional need first. So that's where I think we're at the moment. I think that we have got a group of children across, all sectors really, that have missed identification while we've been in COVID, and are now coming through and are being seen to be, well, it's just mislearning. Well, actually, it's not mislearning. This is about missed identification in sort of earliest years. So there is a huge link between, the children that have got additional needs that haven't been identified and mental health and well-being. And that challenge that challenge then gets more as they go through the school system, because if that identification is still not happening, or they are just seen to be, children who've got issues or needs or whatever you want to call them, they're the youngsters that often get excluded, or they get taken out of lessons by a TA, and actually nobody's addressing, what are those underlying needs, and how can we really get to the bottom of all of this?
It's just so much to take on board, Lorraine, because, we're aware of what we think the impact of COVID has been. But when we start to take away those layers, and we've both used that word a fair bit during this chat, you realise actually this is a journey for quite a while now of how it's impacted our children and young people in lots of different ways, really. And it's good to hear from people like yourself that we're starting to realise that it's not just about catching up on lost work and so on. It's these other impacts, really.
Yeah.
I'm hoping, because we heard a lot during the pandemic of parents suddenly, because you have been sitting down with children, to think, oh, hang on, you're struggling there. I didn't realise, because, a lot of us were homeschooling. We didn't see often that aspect of your child. And I've gone in to speak to teachers and so on. I'm hoping that might be able, parent power might be a way through some of these things. Yeah. I'm wondering then on the back of that, and you've shared a lot with us today, which is brilliant. I'm so grateful, because it really helps me and hopefully others to really understand what's happening, a great snapshot of our education system at the moment. Do you feel optimistic? I mean, there's a lot going on here, and it's very easy to feel pessimistic when you hear all these things happening. But do you feel that there's a way through?
I do feel optimistic, Donna, because I think that, but I think that no matter what is thrown at the education profession from up high, so whatever the outcomes of the green paper, the white paper, whatever, teachers will continue to do the very best they can for the individuals in front of them. And I think that, as I said right at the beginning, I see some brilliant practice out there. And for me, it's how do we get that practice shared? So how do we make sure? And I know, social media is great. Twitter, often you'll find things, people saying, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And I think that's what we're missing in education today. And again, because of not being able to mix and not going face-to-face to conferences and all that sort of stuff, and we're starting to do that more now. But just that sharing of good practice, and, I've got this child that's done this and that, and I haven't got a clue what to do. Oh, well, we had one like that. And it's those conversations that teachers are really good at. One thing I'll say about teachers is, well, the majority of teachers, they don't keep things to themselves. If they've had a good day, they will tell everybody. But if they've had a bad day, they'll tell everybody as well. But, I want to get back, and this is the profession I came into, where everybody feels that they can share the good times and the bad times. And I think in schools where that is a culture and ethos, and there's lots of them, then that is as high a quality professional development that you can get anywhere, because you are learning from each other. And now we're not having to be in silos and do everything online and all the rest of it. I do hope. And the same with parents. I think that parents need to get back into schools, and there's got to be that engagement again, not just online or through emails or, whatever platform you've used. Let's get people working together again when now we can, sort of mix. So I am optimistic. I think we've learned a lot in the pandemic. I think there's been some really positive things during the pandemic, and we just need to take those forward and just believe that what you are doing is right. And if you're getting, obviously, if there's impact and outcomes for those particular children, then you're doing a good job. And don't forget that.
Yeah, thank you. And it's so good to know people like you are out there, giving back, and you're a great advocate and ally to teachers and families and so on, driving through and sharing this great practice. And, I know at Succeed, we'd love to be involved in some way to be able to give a platform to that, because we often say, let's keep talking. And it's that idea of communication and, talking about technology, Lorraine, it's easier now to share things without, even leaving your desk. You can see some great practice or great ideas, top tips, without having to go somewhere as well. So it's more accessible now to find, insights in that way. Somebody had said to me a little while ago when I'd asked a similar question about where do we go from here, the key that they thought, and I kept it because it meant a lot to me, was that the human spirit will get us through. Like you said, the spirit of a profession like teachers, our want as parents to do the best for our children, charities like Succeed, people like you, that want and that, human spirit that we've all got is one of the ways we'll get through this, I think, and overcome some of these challenges. But, thank you. Talking about human spirit, you've got a great human spirit, Lorraine, because you are an inspirational individual, and thank you so much for your time. I know people will get a lot from this conversation, as I have. If folks want to reach out to you and keep in touch or ask you a question, are you happy for people to reach out to you in that way?
Absolutely. I've got a website. I'm on Twitter. So again, I know you'll share my details, and yes, please do just get in touch, and that's I'll do my best to help, support, or whatever.
Yeah,
okay,
thank you. And Lorraine, if it's people who are beyond the UK, is that okay too? Because we want to talk across the world about this stuff.
Yeah, and when I worked at Nason, I did a lot of international work. So, I have worked in sort of various parts of the world to and so I know a bit about some of the more international systems as well. So, very happy.
Thank you. And happily, what's great practice here or across the world is just great practice for us all, isn't it? Because we all need the same things. Our children do, and us as adults as well, which is great. So again, thank you so much. There's a lot there, and we will indeed share links and so on with folks who are interested. And of course, we will have lots of information on our website as well. And we need to go away and think at Succeed about how we're going to give a platform to share some of this great practice that we think could be a way through here to really add to the conversation. So thank you, Lorraine, and thank you to everybody listening to this. Lorraine and I wanted to do this chat because we want to get everybody thinking, don't we, Lorraine, about how we are aware of what's happening now and how we figure out how we navigate through and do the best for our children and adults as well. So thank you to everybody who's listened, and we hope to see you next time for another great conversation. And
thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video as much as we did putting it together. Now, we have some more amazing content for you. Please feel free to click this link here and learn more about Jamie Baker, who works as an educational therapist. Jamie talks about some of the successes and obstacles she's seen as she's worked with individuals who have learning differences. If you have any comments or questions, leave them in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching.